secret lives can be the death of you.
A brutal killing.
She was just this lovable girl who had no enemies.
There was no reason for this.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
The dangers of internet dating, it's a game of Russian roulette.
Only her closest friends knew that she had this wild side.
There's plenty of crazy people out there that, she might have sent a picture to.
The truth will be revealed.
She fought for her life.
And that's a pretty violent way to kill somebody.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Staten Island's Willowbrook neighborhood. A world away from the hustle and bustle of New York.
It's basically like Smallville, USA. The neighborhood itself is made up of a lot of Orthodox Jewish families.
On a sunny Saturday, you'll see people walking to the synagogue. Safe, quiet area.
But when a mother comes home one night after work, she finds it far too quiet.
Parsy came home around 7 p.m. that night. Something didn't appear to be right from the beginning.
The back door appeared to be open. She thought her daughter, Eliza, would still be at work.
The house appeared to be in disarray. There was papers thrown on the floor, drawers open, objects thrown all over the ground. The first thing she did is to call her daughter to see if Eliza was okay. There was no answer. She was upset and worried. She goes to check her daughter's bedroom door. It's locked.
She panicked. She ran outside. She called 911 and waited for the police to come.
She felt that something bad happened, and then she didn't want to see that by herself.
NYPD Detective Michael Kenny is called to the scene.
When the police come in, they break down the door. Eliza Parsy was found dead in her bedroom. She was 18 years old.
Once the police told Seema what had happened to Eliza, she just started shrieking, screaming, like people who didn't even know what was going on were coming out of the houses to see what was going on outside. She could not believe the daughter that she just left several hours earlier was now dead.
To capture the killer, Detective Kenny will need to piece together Eliza's final day on Earth.
The last 24 hours are critical to any investigation. It provides the information the investigator needs, such as who, what, where, when, and why. And that applies to every murder case as you're trying to solve it.
The first thing we do in trying to determine the time of death was speak to the last people that spoke to her. So our first interview, obviously, would be Seema, her mother. When Seema left around 10 a.m. in the morning to go to work, Eliza was still home. Eliza normally would have been going to work around 1 p.m. That particular day, she called in late. So she was going to work after 1 o'clock. Seema comes home around 7. So somewhere between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. is when Eliza was killed.
Through tears, her mother provides the details of Eliza's life. now cut tragically short.
Eliza and her mother were very close. This was her little girl who she was looking forward to, watching grow up and get married and have kids. She just graduated high school. She was taking off a year just to work and save up some money. She was just a very friendly, outgoing girl, liked by anybody who knew her. Eliza grew up in a very religious, Orthodox household. Her mother and father divorced about a year before the murder, and her father moved back to Israel.
Eliza's mother isn't the only family member interviewed at the scene.
Eliza had a half-brother, Riviv Gabe, and he was just getting married as the parents got divorced.
Riviv ran a kosher cookie business. I wanted to know what he did that day, where he was. Riviv told me that he was delivering cookies. He was out on Long Island around 1 p.m. Making a delivery. After he learned of his sister's death, he came to the house to console his mother. Riviv was with Seema, hugging her, consoling her, and asking me a lot of questions. How could somebody do this? We need to solve this case.
For Detective Kenny and his team, the first step is to examine the crime scene.
There's Eliza laying on the ground, naked. There was a pillow over her face, a towel underneath her, and a mattress that was pulled over part of her body.
Her hair was wet still, so they were theorizing that she would have just come out of the shower.
But it almost appeared that she was placed there. It looked like there was some bruising on the face. There wasn't a lot of trauma to the neck.
Suffocation is one of those types of murder that requires the victim to be overpowered by the assailant. It is not a death that is easily accomplished if the victim is able to fight and struggle, and therefore it can take a prolonged period of time, and there's an element of pain and suffering.
But this person overpowered Eliza pretty quickly, but you would think it would be a male, somebody bigger and stronger than she was.
She was in a state of undress, which automatically you have to entertain the possibility that there was sexual assault or sexual activity.
We fingerprinted all the areas that we could. We bagged the pillow that was over her face, the towel that was underneath Eliza. There was a spot or two of blood on the towel.
And they discovered some skin under her fingernails. Of course, they scraped that and sent that to the lab also to check for DNA.
When investigating a crime such as this, you want to throw a wide net and try to collect as much evidence and data as possible.
We knew that ultimately some DNA would be coming back from Eliza, whether the blood stain or the stuff under her fingernails. I felt early on that anybody I spoke to, I would take a DNA swab.
But processing this evidence takes time.
The CSI effect, as it's known, has altered the public's perception of how long things take. Crimes are not solved in 2 hours. It takes hours and hours of examining evidence and analyzing test results that come back.
Obviously, you're not going to stop an investigation and just wait till it comes back. This was a high-profile case, and the pressure to solve this case was strong.
Detectives work to uncover what brought the killer into the Parsy's home.
There was a few possibilities in how Eliza was killed. The first, obviously, being a burglary. Given that the house was in disarray, that was obviously our first angle.
After the police did a search, they determined that maybe a few dollars and some jewelry was missing.
If you're breaking into a house to steal spare change and the homeowner comes in, what the burglar is thinking is, I can try to run away, but I may not make it. And if I don't make it, then I'm going to jail for a long time. And so they make a split-second decision and they commit a murder.
In this particular case, it appeared that somebody entered through the rear door. The first thing you want to check is people's MOs. Is there a pattern? Is there a particular person that's going around, going through unlocked back doors?
Detectives canvass the neighborhood, looking for a lead. They discover a community in shock.
It's not a place where you get murders. But here you have a girl who everybody might have saw the day before, waving, saying hi. And now they find out that she's dead and possibly raped in her own bedroom. I mean, they just couldn't fathom it. This is something you see on the 6 o'clock news in another neighborhood, not in their backyard. It's also a neighborhood where neighbors look out for each other. If there's a stranger, people take notice.
Looking at the window from 1 p.m. to 7, the neighbors did identify this particular group of landscapers that were in that vicinity at the window where Eliza could have been killed. That would be the opportunity if there's a bunch of people cutting lawns. Nobody would take a second look if somebody was to walk down into the driveway, go in the back of the house, and try doors. There was 5 young men. We end up interviewing each one of them. All 5 of the landscapers, we took DNA swabs, and we took fingerprints. It was also helpful to get a reaction on somebody not wanting to be swabbed or being swabbed. Each one of them were very cooperative. My gut was that they weren't involved, that they were just landscapers doing their job.
They look to Eliza herself for more clues.
And looking at the body, it didn't appear like there was a substantial struggle. If somebody broke into your house and it was a stranger, there would be some screaming and yelling, maybe chasing, running around. If Eliza was familiar with the assailant, it might have been like, what are you doing here? And then an attack happened.
A key detail from the crime scene adds weight to this theory.
In cases in which the body is covered and the body is concealed, that suggests that the murderer has feelings of shame about what they've done.
They can't handle looking at the dead person, which leads the investigator to believe this killer knew the dead person.
Detectives turn to her brother Riviv to learn more about her relationships.
Riviv gave us some direction on whom we want to speak to regarding her personal life. Most of his conversation was directed at the ex-boyfriend. He insisted that we look at him, that he was a controlling, aggressive ex-boyfriend that had feelings for her that were still unresolved. Riviv felt strongly that this was the person who killed Eliza.
The troubled history between Eliza Parsy and her former boyfriend Marique has caught the attention of the NYPD.
She had broken up with him a little while before, and he did not take it well. On surface, it's just a couple of teenagers breaking up. This was a little more intense. She was this Jewish Orthodox girl, and he was a Muslim, came from a Muslim family, so some people wondered if that's the reason why she broke up with him.
The families didn't really want them together in the first place.
He started to stalk her, follow her to work, follow her after work, seeing where she was, who she hung out with. He just wouldn't take a no from her. There was one time when he even broke in. She was sleeping, and she woke up to see him standing over her bed.
He was definitely somebody that we were looking at, a person of interest that we felt strongly that he might have been involved. We start going into some of his background. We came to understand that he had some sort of business connections with fake handbags. He was somewhat of a quasi-criminal. He wasn't an altar boy, so to speak.
Then, Marique shows up at the crime scene.
It's rare to have persons who I will call witnesses for now, waiting at the crime scene to volunteer information to the police. It's unusual.
I felt it was important to grab him, bring him back to the precinct, and basically get a timeline from him in the last 24 hours where he's been. His whereabouts for those 24 hours was, I was home, sleeping, and did this and that. He didn't have a concrete alibi, especially the window that we were looking at from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Detectives take Marique's DNA and look into his movements on the day of the murder.
Eliza lived in Staten Island, and Staten Island is separated from the rest of New York City by the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. A lot of New Yorkers have what they call an easy pass. They will have a time and date when somebody went over the bridge and paid the toll. So this is a very effective tool for police.
We ordered the Easy Pass records, we ordered his telephone records. We were waiting for them to come back, along with the DNA.
Marique's behavior takes a strange turn.
Marique showed up at the funeral.
It was quite the ruckus. In fact, I think Riviv had to be restrained from going after him. The mother was yelling and screaming. They had to forcibly remove the ex-boyfriend from the services. For the ex-boyfriend to go to the funeral, from my perspective, there's be a couple of reasons. Number one, he wanted to go to appear that he was grieving Eliza just like everybody else. He also might have wanted to go to see other people's reaction, what information he might be able to gather from the conversations at the service. Staying close to the investigation could be a reason to be there. He was a constant person of interest.
As the spotlight glares over Marique, Eliza's pathology exam reveals a key new detail.
It was determined that she was not raped, but it was determined that she recently had consensual sex with someone.
One of the angles that they're normally going to look at is talking to Eliza's friends to get an idea of the person that died. And in the conversation, they let us know there was this kind of secret life that Eliza was living.
Only her closest friends knew that she had this wild side to her, where she would go into clubs in the city, and sometimes she would meet somebody that night. And to the people on the block or her neighborhood, that was probably just as shocking, if not more, than the murder itself.
She had a very solid community of people that were the same as her. And, at 18 to say, you know what, let me go into the city, find somebody different, find somebody more fun. There's a certain maturity to think of that and want to explore outside your own little community.
But Eliza was doing more than frequenting clubs.
We found that Eliza was meeting people on the internet and having sexual encounters with the people that she met. Back then, there was no Instagram, there wasn't Facebook. The internet was still in a kind of an infancy stage. It was a bit of a oddity. Was it ill-advised to meet people on the internet? Yes.
The dangers of internet dating is it's a game of Russian roulette. You do not know what is going to happen to you if you get into a closed room with a person you've never met before.
There's plenty of crazy people out there that she might have sent a picture to, and that was enough to try and track her down. She might have said where she lives, and that was the extent of their exchange. And he might have come and killed her.
Detectives begin the daunting task of tracing Eliza's online activity.
When we actually see a murder that the theory is it was internet dating based, they're very difficult to solve because of the ability to hide behind a website, to hide behind an email address, to hide the address out of the country. It's very difficult to deal with and solve because you're dealing with fake identities all the time.
They manage to uncover a direct link to Eliza's timeline.
Police found out that Eliza was supposed to meet up with somebody that she had met online, and she had talked to him the night before her death, and that she had made plans to meet up with him in the near future.
The old adage is if you have a dead woman, you put her last 4 boyfriends in a room and one of them did it.
Is this internet encounter with this young man, maybe he wanted something more and she didn't want to give him it.
Detectives hunting Eliza Parsy's killer have a new person of interest, a man she met online.
Nobody was calling us and say, by the way, I also met Eliza on the internet, and we were intimate. So we had to do our due diligence and find this young man.
Eliza's communication with him reveals another key detail.
The day before she was killed, he did meet with her after 10 o'clock when Seema left. They were sexually active.
What she would do is, her mother had a pretty set schedule, so she knew when she would leave and come back. She would have people come over to her house, and instead of coming in through the front, she would leave the back door open, and this way no one would see them.
I don't know if that was a daily thing, if he would have came back the next day at 10 o'clock. He would have been somebody that was familiar with the area, familiar with the place, familiar with when mom's not home. So he would definitely fit in the timeline of when she was killed.
In order to speak with him, they must first track him down.
We had some forensic detectives taking IP addresses and matching them with people.
They trace the young man to a home in Brooklyn. Police bring him in for questioning.
If you've communicated with a person on a computer, there's no way of hiding that. And there will never be a way for you to deny that. Full stop.
He was cooperative. He was forthright that he did know her, that he did meet her, that he'd been to the house, how it was coordinated. You know, he waited for her sometimes. If he was there too early, he would have to walk around the block. He knew the mother's car. He would have to wait to see to make sure that they didn't cross paths. He was very forthright regarding the relationship, that it was a secret relationship, that they met on the internet, that there was only a couple of encounters. When I told him that she was murdered, he was obviously upset. He was surprised. But he did say that he did not meet her on the day she was killed. All this stuff was information that he gave me freely, and he also freely gave me his DNA. We ordered the Easy Pass records. We ordered his telephone records. I didn't feel that he was a person of interest.
Investigators continue to scour Eliza's digital history.
For each person that we identified and she met on the internet, I would go through a timeline. And I would have them do the 24 hours, what they did, where they were, who they were with during that time, how they knew Eliza. And obviously I would take a DNA swab of each one of them. In interviewing each of the person that we identified, I didn't have a specific feeling that any one of them was a person of interest. They seemed to be people that were involved.
They were looking at these people, but no one was ruled out. Eliza's murder was not your typical homicide, but the detectives that work it, they were very dogged. That's the thing with homicide detectives. You know, they take it personal. It's almost like one of theirs, one of their family, and they work, you know, it seems like they work that much harder. When this one, they left no stone unturned, all while waiting for the DNA to come back.
As police quietly investigate Eliza's secret life, the press is making it public.
It went from a burglary to now here's a young, pretty girl who might have been caught up in some kind of sexual encounter, and you know that gets the press a little more interested.
It was an unfair dramatization of what what's going on. I personally felt bad about that. I did get phone calls from Seema, asking me, and she found that out from the news. It wasn't fun to tell the mother that she learned from the news that her daughter, who was 18, was sexually active with strangers. It wasn't a comfortable conversation. When Eliza was 18, my daughters were like 15, 16. Every once in a while, those things can creep in. You can say, oh, my daughter, is home alone at times. But you have to be able to separate your professional from your personal life. You see the things that people have done to another, and, you try not to get hardened from it, but you have to look at it as a job. You're there to make a difference. You're there to get from A to Z, and, you have to stay focused.
This focus leads to detectives uncovering her name on a police report.
This kind of secret life that Eliza was living, unbeknownst to her mother and her brother, had its consequences. She made a report that she was sexually assaulted.
She left the bar in Harlem and went to an apartment, and when she woke up, there were several naked men standing over her.
Could have one of these 4 or 5 assailants looked for retribution towards her for this assault? I didn't do anything, and you're causing trouble for me. I don't want to be arrested, and I'm going to now kill you.
A report claiming Eliza was sexually assaulted by multiple men gives Detective Kenny a new line of inquiry.
I think this kind of alternate lifestyle that she was at a young age of 18 had its consequences. And this was obviously something of interest for us as to what might have caused her demise.
But tracking them down will be an uphill battle.
Police investigated it, but they were not able to arrest anyone.
It wasn't like all of a sudden, this is it. We found out that she made a complaint that she was raped, and these are the people. There were so many different layers, so many aspects. But you always have to follow wherever investigation goes. You're not going to discount anything. Obviously, then I had to follow through with that and find out who she met and how she had contact with these people.
You as a police officer have to be aware of that at the time, that if there are other suspects, you must investigate them. It's part of your job. You can't be totally tunnel visioned on the one person and only that person. If these branches take you away, you have to investigate it.
As detectives search for the identities of the men who assaulted Eliza, the DNA results come back and open up an entirely new direction.
The first phone call I get from the medical examiner's office is that the DNA results ruled out any of the males that she met on the internet, the landscapers. It ruled out the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend. To my surprise, the DNA that is found on the towel was that of a relative, a male.
The only male relative they had was the half-brother. Riviv Gabe.
To me, it wasn't like, oh, we got the person. It was that, could have been the blood was left because he had a bloody nose the day before and they just didn't clean the towel.
DNA can be a very helpful investigative tool in that it may cause investigators to look at someone that they had not considered before, that they may want to investigate what their activity was the last 24 hours and how that related to the victim's activities.
Detectives work to understand how Riviv fits into the timeline of the homicide.
When I originally spoke to him and asked him where he was, what he was doing that day, he said he was out in Long Island making a delivery. We just started to break down where he said he was at what particular time. So we ordered his Easy Pass records. Once we get the records, we'd be able to get a photograph. As you go through the toll, he takes a picture. They're what they call robbery cameras. So anybody that comes onto the island, we can basically have a picture of who was in that car. He had a very unique delivery truck. We had photos of him coming over the Verrazano in around 1 o'clock. Now Riviv is a person of interest. Why would he say he was somewhere else at the window where she was apparently killed?
This gives them enough for a warrant to examine Riviv's cell phone records.
I carry my cell phone everywhere I go. If you go to my cell phone provider, you will find that the cell phone towers were going off in the area I'm telling you I was in. Depending on what you've got turned on your phone, you can be placed down within 2 or 3 yards of where you actually were at any given time. And unless it's a great coincidence that I just happened to be within 10 square yards of where the murder took place, and I had a motive and opportunity to do it, my cell phone is going to clear me.
When we got his cell site information puts him in Staten Island in and around 1 p.m. We knew exactly where Riviv was at any given time. 1:30, we have him in the area of the house. And then right on the corner around 2:10, so why would he lie?
Riviv's timeline gives him means and opportunity. Next comes the search for motive.
About a year or so before the murder, Riviv got married. And as a wedding gift, the family gave Riviv the business, delivering the cookies to the grocery stores.
The problem with it was that whether it was Riviv not knowing how to run it, being a young kid, just married, but the business wasn't doing well.
We found out that he was trying to keep his wife in the lifestyle that she was accustomed to. Our parents had a very nice house. They had more money than Riviv and his family, and that was a lot of pressure on him.
I've experienced several cases in my time where the suspect is a family member. This often happens when there's inheritance involved. So money is a great motivator. Money makes people kill too.
But Riviv's money trouble doesn't explain why Eliza would be targeted.
But Riviv did stay close with his sister. He still kept an eye on her, asked her what she was doing.
There was nothing that there was hostility or she owed him money or they grew up together hating each other. But you want to kind of let the facts take you to whatever place it takes you.
With Riviv looking guilty, detectives need to compare his DNA specifically to what was found at the scene.
The DNA that is found on the towel was that of a Riviv's. And the skin under her nails was in fact also Riviv's. There's nothing more solid than when somebody was assaulted and there's dead skin under somebody's nails. Why would a brother want to kill his sister for no reason? It doesn't make any sense.
Detective Michael Kenny is convinced Eliza's half-brother is the one who killed her. but concerns over a conviction still remain.
I have to go back at some point and tell the mother that your son killed your daughter, and she's gonna want to know why. The best way to know why is to get it from him. So I called Riviv and told him the ex-boyfriend had some other friends that we were looking into, and I don't know who they are. I asked him to come to the precinct and look at some photographs. So he's a little belligerent. He started giving out to me that why it's taking so long, that this case is going on for a month. We all know it was the ex-boyfriend. Why don't you arrest him already? So I have to play along, and I was apologetic. I'm trying my best, but I need your help. To my surprise, he does come in the next day, but he brings his wife. I have his wife sit in one room, and I bring him into an interview room.
Armed with a meticulously constructed timeline, Detective Kenny goes in to break apart Riviv's story.
I start again asking him about his whereabouts, where he was and when. So he starts answering the questions like normally. But then he starts like, why are you asking me? I thought I'm here to look at pictures. And he is starting getting a little more hostile.
They hit him with they knew that he was lying. They knew that he wasn't in Brooklyn at the time of the death. They knew that he was in Staten Island. And they kept pressuring him. Why'd you do this? And he wouldn't crack. He wouldn't say that he did it.
It's pretty common for people to deny even with that kind of evidence, just for self-preservation.
If the police have evidence that you've done it, and they've got the skills to interview you, they will make you crack in that interview room. Very few people who have committed a crime can withstand a successful police interview.
I just laid it all out for him, that we have your DNA, we know you did it, just tell us why you did it. He kept denying, I didn't do it, but I kind of threatened him. I told him, tell me what happened, or I will go out and tell your wife and the community that you raped your sister and that you and then killed her. Because I don't have any other information, and that's as good a story as any. At this point, he started crying. He told us what occurred. He tells me that the business wasn't doing very well. So in Riviv's mind, something that might have been worth a lot of money a couple of years ago as a wedding gift wasn't worth anything. So he felt that he was still owed a wedding gift. He came to find out that his mother came into some money from the sale of a house. He believed it was more than $25,000. So he felt that she was hoarding that money somewhere. So that's why he broke into the house.
She caught him in the act, want to know what's going on.
The confrontation happened in that hallway and then ended up in her room.
The timeline explains moment by moment the tragic events of Eliza's final day and how Riviv's lust for money led him to kill.
Mom leaves the house regularly around 10 a.m. every day, leaving Eliza home alone. Eliza calls her boss and lets her know that she's not going to be at work on time, that she's going to come in later.
Riviv made some deliveries in Brooklyn, and then he altered his route and headed to Staten Island. He went over the Verrazano Bridge, went to the apartment that he went to many times before, entered through the back door, which he knew was open at times.
He already had gone through the downstairs, and he was in the mother's bedroom looking for the money.
Eliza's just coming out of the shower with a towel on her, and he's going through drawers.
She could have grabbed the phone, I'm calling Mom or I'm calling the police, which would have escalated his anger.
She put up a valiant fight. It was all skin under her fingernails, like she fought for her life.
And then he took a pillow, put it over her face, took a mattress and covered her body and left.
After he killed her, he got back into his van, which was still filled with cookies, drove back over the Verrazano Bridge, and went into Brooklyn and finished his route. He did show up later in the day, and again appeared to be a very upset brother. But it turned out to be just an act.
Riviv never found anyone in the house because, unbeknownst to him, that money was spent. So there wasn't any money in the house to begin with. I never felt Riviv had any remorse. Sometimes you'll feel like somebody is telling you what happened as I've been holding this in for so long. It just comes out in kind of a release of guilt and stuff, but I never felt that Riviv had an ounce of guilt. If you define a sociopath as just some lacking regret, I think you'd probably say he's a sociopath.
Police charge Riviv Gabay with the murder of his sister.
I have to tell a mother that, yeah, we solved your daughter's murder, but it was your son who did it. So, it was difficult for me to do that. And, when I went to the house and I told her, she was hysterical. She spoke about her daughter and how beautiful she was and all the things that she had going for her in the future that was ahead of her. And how the son that she brought into this family ultimately killed her.
On May 2nd, 2006, Riviv pleads guilty to a reduced charge of first-degree manslaughter. He is sentenced to 18 years in prison.
1 year for every year that Eliza was alive. So he had to do the same amount of time in prison.
Seema then just started yelling uncontrollably in both English and Hebrew at her son, asking why, or how could he do such a thing? How could he commit such a crime? Here was a young, vibrant girl who had her whole life ahead of her. He ruined so many lives just for a couple of dollars and a piece of jewelry.
I personally felt for the mother. She lost both her kids in the same day. It just wasn't a happy ending.
It goes counter to the whole notion of family. It's a complete destruction of that trust that you have in one another.
She was beaten severely. She was beaten with a claw hammer, she was beaten with a baseball bat.
A brutal killing.
You hear of, crimes of passion. This goes beyond that.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
She knew where she was gonna be, at what time, when she'd be back.
When you start owing drug dealers money, people start getting desperate and start getting violent.
Somewhere in that weird web, we got a murderer. And now we just got to figure out who.
The truth will be revealed.
Somehow or another, somebody's got to answer for this.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Grovetown, Georgia, just outside Augusta. It's known as a safe place to raise a family.
Grovetown is starting to grow a little bit, kind of as Augusta's bedroom community. It's kind of a nice little pocket. Your average, middle class working families.
Everyone seems to know everyone. Everyone's friendly. You wouldn't really lock your doors.
But that sense of security can be dangerously misleading.
Emergency 911.
Yes, I'm over here at Cold Springs. The back door's broke in, and I had come over here to do some work, and I called the owner. I hollered in the door, and I didn't get no response.
All right, I'll get them on over there.
The patrol units that responded, when they arrive at the scene, within short order, they start seeing blood not too far inside, the back door.
My supervisor told me we had an assault and they needed me at the scene right away.
The victim is identified as 41-year-old Kay Parsons.
When I arrived, Kay was already on her way to the hospital. They didn't know if she was going to live or not. They've already got the scene taped off with crime scene tape.
Lead investigator Jimmy Edmonds and his partner Brian Jones begin investigating the grisly crime.
I could see the pool of blood where she was at. She was beaten severely. You can see there was a struggle that took place in the foyer that led into the living room. And then you could tell it went out into the garage. There was a bloody baseball bat next to her. And we also located a bloody claw hammer underneath her car. When you think of a hammer and a baseball bat being used, you start thinking of this is personal. It's not like a knife or a gunshot. This is a up close and personal beating.
When you talk about brutality, that's one thing. But this was overkill.
Their first task is to locate her next of kin.
I was able to get a number for David Parsons, her husband. I made contact with him. He was in Los Angeles, California on business. Obviously, he was very concerned about his wife. I had to explain it to him on the phone, which is very tough. He immediately got on an airplane and flew home. You could tell he was distraught. He told the doctor to take her off life support.
Their case is now a homicide. Investigators must reconstruct the last 24 hours of Kay's life to uncover who had reason to commit such a brutal murder.
You have to start trying to figure out where was she, what was she doing, who was she talking to? Did she have any problems with anybody? Did any arguments happen here recently?
She was, always friendly with everybody, but she pretty much lived for her son.
When you have a death, and especially kind of a whodunit right from the get-go, then everybody becomes suspect.
You want to talk to the spouse. It's going to give you some good information to see if there's any problems or anybody has a motive to hurt her. Time's ticking, so, I've got to ask them some hard questions and find out about, their family life. Are they having problems?
With the type of personal crime that this was, It could have easily been something. It could have been family related.
David says he last spoke to Kay at 6:45 p.m., the night before she was attacked, and had been unable to reach his wife by phone all morning.
He gave me no indication of any marital problems. He said, you know, they were in love, they were high school sweethearts.
Everything is just peach pie, just wonderful.
He'd been in California for a couple of days, so I knew it wasn't him that committed the crime. I asked him if Kay had any problems with anybody, if anybody he could think of that would possibly do this, and he said absolutely not.
You still have to figure out, you know, what the motivation is for Kay to be dead.
With so many unanswered questions, their hope rests in Kay's timeline.
You can't look at a body and go, okay, yeah, that 3:05 p.m. is when that, you know, it doesn't work that way. Basically, the frame of reference comes down to who's the last person that talked to him.
Kay Parsons was very predictable. She would get the kids off to school, then come back. She had her daily routine.
We learned Kay left and took her son to school. On the way to school, they stopped and got some fast food for breakfast. She then took him to the school, dropped him off. We were able to verify that through the principal and teachers that were outside. We found the fast food bag and the coffee cup on the floor. We could go back to that place to see, you know, to get a timeline of where she was at.
They learn that Kay purchased the food items at 6:55 a.m. This establishes a 2-hour window until she is discovered.
When you're working backwards from the death, okay, who found him?
A lot of people assumed that it was the contractor who was at the house that may have done this. What was he doing there? He just happened to stumble upon it.
Was that just a happenstance come by that day? Did he have a schedule to come by?
We interviewed Mr. Cozart to find out everything that took place.
What were you doing over there? What did you see when you got there? What were you supposed to be there to do? He said
He was supposed to come there and finish doing some work on the back door.
Cozart tells police he started the repair the previous afternoon and returned at 8:45 a.m. to finish the job.
When he arrived, he knocked on the door, didn't get an answer. He called several times, didn't get an answer. So he went to the backyard to look at the back door where he was doing his work at.
I just opened the gate and I walked in and I seen the glass all over the patio and I said, this don't look good. And I walked up and I hollered, I said, hey, is anybody in there?
He got no response. And that's when he dialed 911.
I said, something bad's happened over here.
He also claims before arriving at Kay's house, he was on another job site.
So did he have enough time to do all that stuff and then stage it and then go and change and make sure all this stuff was right and then come back, oh, I happened to find this.
Investigators looked to confirm his whereabouts earlier that morning.
Mr. Cozart was very forthcoming, answered all our questions. He would, gave no indication he was trying to hide anything. We were able to clear him.
He was just there to do his job, and he happened to find this awful crime that had been committed.
But he does provide detectives with an important lead.
He said that when he came back around front and was calling 911.
Then I seen that boy sitting, the next door neighbor sitting down on a rock across the street. And that made me kind of suspicious right there.
Just sitting there. This person asked Mr. Cozart, he said, tell them my house has been broken into as well, which was the house right next door. I found it very interesting. So, of course, wanted to find out where he'd been and why he was there, or why he was across the street.
The young man is identified as Kay's neighbor, 22-year-old Michael Bowers, whose claim appears to be true.
So now that we've got that second house that's been broke into and signs of a burglary and blood on the back door jamb.
And that blood ended up being Kay's blood. So as an investigator, you got to sit back and think, well, if you are a criminal, a burglar, if you just break into somebody's house and beat this woman eventually to death, are you gonna leave and go break into the house next door and hang around to get caught? That doesn't make any sense. I had my suspicions about Michael and why he was there.
Detectives need to speak with Kay Parsons' neighbor, Michael, who they believe may know something about her shocking murder.
You got Michael sitting out there that all of a sudden is just there, kind of out of the blue, with this going on.
As police question Michael, his mother, Becky Sears, and her younger son, Christopher, turn up.
Becky was concerned about her friend Kay.
Looking for insight into how Michael may be involved, they examine the relationship between the two houses.
From the minute that David and Kay moved next door to Becky and her husband, they became immediate friends. They did everything together. Their sons played together. They had couples tennis, couples vacations. They were inseparable. You could see the close relationship that they had with one another, almost like sisters.
Becky tells police about the last time she saw Kay.
Becky and Kay, being friends like they were, they knew each other's routines like clockwork. Becky, she said she left that morning to take her kids to school. She told us that she saw Kay backing out of her driveway. She said she drove to the daycare, dropped her youngest child off, and then drove to the school and dropped her other children off, and then left from there and went to work.
Becky says she returned home as soon as she got the call from her son, Michael.
Michael was there at the time that the contractor found all of this, so he happened to be out front. Now we've got that time frame to work with.
Detectives need to uncover what Michael was up to.
As an investigator, I don't believe in coincidences. Certainly in homicide investigations, there's no such thing as coincidence. There's a reason why things happen.
We took him back to our office and conducted an interview with him to find out, what his story was. Michael had a troubled past. He'd been arrested a few times. He told us that he left the house that morning to go do a painting job with somebody. Come to find out there was no painting job he was going to do. He was lying about the whole thing.
If you lie about your whereabouts, they're going to check that. If you lie about your timeline, they're going to check that. If you lie about who you were with, they're going to verify that. They're going to check everything.
Caught in his lie, Michael offers up a new story.
He said he walked over to a friend's house and pretty much hung out there for a while until his mother left, and then he walked back home. Obviously, he didn't want to get in trouble with his mother because he told her he was going to do a painting job. He called his mother at work and told her that their house had been broken into, but didn't call 911.
Detectives look to place him inside Kay's house that morning.
The back door, the way it was shattered, there was tiny shards of glass everywhere. So I asked Michael to let me see the bottom of his shoes. And as I looked at the bottom of his shoes, I see a tiny shard of glass stuck in the bottom of the shoe. So I was like, well, was he in the house? We sent the glass off to the crime lab, and it came back that it was glass from the Kay's back door. His explanation was that once the handyman told him that the house had been broken into, he walked around back and looked inside. And he said that's how he got the glass in his shoe.
Michael's only hope lies in his alibi. He tells police his friend Anthony can vouch for him.
Anthony also had some problems with drugs. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, did Michael owe people money for drugs? You know, you started getting in that drug world and you start owing people money, they start doing things to your house, to your family. People started getting desperate and start getting violent.
Police bring Anthony in for questioning.
He said that he'd come over in the morning. Told him I had an appointment at 9 o'clock. I guess that's why he decided to come by so damn early. But that's pretty damn early, dude. He lied to y'all and said that we were gonna go looking for work. Yep.
The friend's like, yeah, he was here all the way up until this point right here, and I had to go to work.
I'm telling you the truth, he was with me, and we were in that house. At 8:27, dude, you gotta go, I gotta go. Ultimately, if him being with me is exonerating him, I'm sorry, but it's the truth, dude. I'm not gonna stick up for Michael, but I'm not gonna lie on him either.
Michael, did he have enough time to get home, do this, stage it, clean up, and then be out front when the contractor happened to pull up?
Michael's departure from Anthony's house at 8:30 a.m. leaves a 15-minute window to walk the mile home and attack Kay before the contractor arrives at 8:45 a.m.
There's just not enough time for him to do all that stuff.
As a result, investigators return their focus to the crime scene.
We've got a house that's been broke into and signs of a burglary.
The master bedroom was ransacked. The only thing that we could determine that was taken was some jewelry. There was a lot of things that normally would be taken in a burglary that were still there.
This indicates that Kay potentially caught the intruder in the act.
At that point, you have the home invasion that turned deadly. Her best friend's house next door robbed, and nobody seems to know what is going on. Everyone just wanted to know who could have done this.
Police utilize a neighborhood canvass, hoping for a break.
We shut down the whole neighborhood. There was one way in and one way out, and we had patrol cars and deputies there stopping every car that came in and came out.
The longer you wait, then, memories go bad. It becomes incumbent upon us as investigators to go out there and knock on doors and ask, hey, when you were out there in the neighborhood the other day, did you see anything around this house, or did you see anything entering or leaving the neighborhood? What do we know about the people in the area around there that could have had contact with Kay?
We check our computers and everything to see, is there anybody around this area that is known for these types of crimes? Burglaries, break-ins, things of that nature.
One name stands out, Aaron Fisher.
We were able to determine that there was a person that lived in that neighborhood that I like to call him a frequent flyer, because we deal with him a lot. He had a troubled past. He had a history of thefts and break-ins.
Most burglars, they break into a residence, they steal whatever they can as quickly as possible, and then they get the hell out again.
But if you're breaking into a house and the homeowner walks into the kitchen, you've got a split-second decision on your hands. Am I gonna do a 10-year stint if this person calls 911, or am I gonna kill her?
A known criminal in Kay Parsons' neighborhood leads detectives in a new direction.
You gotta take every lead you can and follow up on every lead with a case like this. Because right now you have a whodunit.
Their suspect, Aaron Fisher, lives within sight of the Parsons home.
That person is definitely flagged, and they would examine the past records and see if that person has a propensity for committing escalating degrees of violence.
I knew that he had had some issues with drugs, issues with some theft and some violence. You start by trying to nail down their time frames, nail down their alibis.
When questioned, Fisher tells police he was at home with his girlfriend until 10:30 a.m. that morning.
When we talked to her, we were able to determine that he wasn't involved, that he had an alibi, he wasn't there at the time.
It's another dead end, meaning Kay's murderer is still at large.
And there was a lot of the neighbors over there that were fearful that, there was somebody out there that was doing this, and, we don't know who they are yet. And so now the whole, psycho killer out running around, that fever kind of goes out. They're scared. And particularly with a crime of this magnitude, they're double scared at that point that we don't know who he is, and he can come back and do that to me. The pressure's always there.
The fear is realized through shocking news regarding Kay's neighbor.
We got a phone call, said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" They said, "Becky Sears just got shot." I said, "Do what?"
There were so many twists and turns. Every time you seemed like you got a little more information and you had it figured out, boom, here comes another zinger, and it would just throw the entire story off course.
I went to the hospital, spoke with Becky at the hospital. She said she had went to work that night to do payroll because she hadn't been at work. She'd been at the hospital where Kay was.
Someone came out of the bushes, and I heard what I thought was a gunshot, and I fell. He said, he wants his money, or next time it would be my face.
Becky said she didn't know who this person was. She never saw him before in her life, and said she didn't know what he was talking about.
Becky is convinced her shooting is linked to the break-ins and Kay's murder.
Whoever killed Kay, for whatever reason, now had a motive to kill her.
It's not a coincidence. I mean, your house gets broken into, Kay's house gets broken into. She's dead, you get shot.
She was also thinking maybe it was a drug debt that Michael owed, or Michael owed somebody some money.
I think he's trying to stay away from all of that.
But something about Becky's story seems off.
I'm thinking, out of all the places that somebody's going to come out and shoot somebody, unless you're just that bad a shot, you're not going to get shot in the lower leg or in the foot. I mean, what purpose does that serve?
You get these feelings, and you get these, intuitions, I guess you call them. You just know something's not right. You do this job long enough and you start dealing with people, and some things that just don't add up. You notice all these little details. You got to have an answer for them.
All it did was just make Becky look suspicious. I mean, because the odds of that happening the way she said it happened, that was astronomical.
With suspicions growing around Becky, Detective Edmonds receives a tip.
I get a phone call from one of the jailers and says there's a gentleman over there that wants to speak with me. So I go over to the jail and I meet with Jerry Jacobs. I don't know who Jerry is, never talked to him in my life.
The first thing you want to look at with somebody, particularly if they're in custody at the time, is what are they charged with? And are they looking to try to make a deal? I'll give you some information if you do this for me, sort of a quid quo pro kind of thing.
He was there on a probation violation of a traffic ticket. So he wasn't in there for anything serious. Jerry proceeds to tell me that he is the brother of Becky Sears, who is the next door neighbor to Kay Parsons. He lived with Becky at her house for a little while, and eventually he moved out with his nephew, Christopher Bowers.
Jerry tells police his sister confided in him.
She come to me one day, or there in the parking lot crying, and I was like, what's wrong? And that's whenever she told me she was having an affair.
He goes on to tell me Becky and David Parsons, Kay's husband, having an affair. And that Kay found out about the affair. I was like, because David Parsons never told me about this. I had no knowledge of an affair until that point in time right there. It kind of blew my mind. So now I'm going, wait a minute. Now we got some It's a motive building here.
And you're putting these pieces of the puzzle together, and it's kind of starting to make sense now that, okay, this probably was a murder based on this love triangle. But was it Kay's husband that did it? Did Becky have something to do with it? Somewhere in that weird web, we got a murderer. And now we just got to figure out who, and we got to figure out how it happened.
Information provided by Becky's brother, Jerry Jacobs, introduces a shocking new motive in the death of Kay Parsons.
Jerry said she would call him up on the phone. She would break down. She would, be hysterical, crying. He would have to talk her down.
And she had asked me if I knew of anyone or if I knew a way that we could do this to kill Kay and make it look like an accident.
She wanted Kay out of the way. She wanted her dead so she could have David.
And then, I'd be like, well, Becky, that's okay. Sometimes we all feel that way about people. She's like, no. She's like, I really want her dead. She said, can we do this? And I'm like, no, we can't.
And I wanted to know why Jerry was coming forward. Why was he telling us about his sister? Jerry told me he was watching the news and he saw about what happened at Kay's house. He said, I couldn't live with myself. If I knew this and I knew they did it, he said, I couldn't live with myself.
I don't know if it was David, if he had something to do with it.
He knows some specifics about it or whatever. He's telling us stuff that, at this point we didn't know.
Detectives show Jerry photographs from the scene in the hope he can provide further insight.
It was like, all right, look, the hammer that was used, he had seen the hammer at Becky's house. He recognized the hammer as being one that Becky had.
It shows that it was definitely premeditated. You can grab a baseball bat, you can grab any sort of other implement to kill somebody, but when you bring a hammer with you as well, it shows that there was a certain degree of planning involved in the murder.
Police believe that if Becky is involved, she must have had help.
He told me, he said, I know who did it. I said, oh, please tell.
Because you're real easy to think it could be Michael, the wayward son.
But he told me, he said, I believe it's going to be Christopher and Becky.
I can just hear them right now scheming something together and thinking they can get away with it.
The accusation directs suspicion to Becky's oldest son.
Christopher, he'd tell me, he's like, Mama called me in the middle of the night last night crying, and, if she says if we could get away with it, it would sure make everything better on her because she loves David so much.
And then you start finding out about the relationship with her sons, how one was the black sheep, how one she doted on. Chris was Mama's boy. He was the golden child.
She was buying him motorcycles. She rented him a house. She bought him a truck. She didn't do any of those things for Michael. So it was a totally different relationship between those two. Christopher knew how upset she was about David, how she wanted to be with David, and she knew that Christopher would do anything for her.
Police returned to Kay's husband, David, to confront him with the affair allegations.
First thing I asked him is, tell me about the affair with Becky. Because I just wanted to blow him out of the water. I wanted him to know that I knew a lot, and it's time to come clean. Of course, when I said that, his eyes got big around as saucers.
You're thinking about the husband, and would the husband have a motive to do it?
He just happened to be out of town when this horrendous crime happened.
But then he opened up. He started telling me all about the affair, how long it had lasted.
Kay found out. She knew about it. We talked about it. We were going to work through it. Me and her stay together and move on and move out.
And he came out and said, I cut it off, and I told Kay that it was over with.
What happened when you broke it off with Becky? How did she take it?
Well, she knew the whole time that I didn't want anything to change with my situation with Kay.
I'm not so sure that you're telling us everything at this point.
I'd also told him I was going to pull his phone records and find out who he'd been talking to and what was going on. Well, he came forward then and told me that the night before the murder that he and Becky did talk on the phone.
I called her late Monday night, I believe, and I did talk to her Tuesday. We just talked for a little while about what was going on, and then we got involved in, phone sex over the phone.
And that was Tuesday night?
Yes.
So he's pretty much letting me know that the affair wasn't over with, like he told his wife.
Is it safe to say that your words were saying no as far as the relationship, and your other communications were saying something different?
Now you kind of start seeing the behind the scenes a little bit, and you start to kind of crack into the not so perfect family. So things weren't as peachy as what it seemed.
It puts them further in it, you know? They're putting themselves further and deeper into this investigation just from not telling the truth.
Detectives know he was over 2,000 miles away when his wife was killed.
I knew he couldn't have committed it. It doesn't rule out that he's involved.
The only people who can answer this question are Becky and Christopher.
We had them in different locations, and we just went ahead and talked to them at the same time. So they didn't have a chance to get their stories together. I honestly thought that once we got in there and we talked to Chris, that he would realize that he was just a patsy.
Christopher didn't say a word, didn't ask why, what for, anything. He refused to speak with us.
Your mom's in custody with us right now. She's talking to us right now. And I want you to think long and hard before you choose to go down a road. I want you to be on the right road.
Whatever you're saying, I'm trying to say is a lie. When you're in this right now, I'm gonna get my lawyer. I want to speak to a lawyer right now.
Becky was quite the opposite.
She agreed to talk to us, which surprised me. I didn't think she would. When we started confronting her about the affair with David, about what her brother had told us, she started coming forward.
This is the opportunity for you to be honest and truthful and to tell me what's going on in your own words.
I cared about him very, very much. And there was a time to where, yes, I thought that we would have been able to have a great relationship.
And it's been over for how long?
I can't really even say that it was ever, I mean, it was over, but we still talked. I told my husband and my husband told her.
So she knew.
She finally starts breaking down. She starts crying, and then she starts telling us it was Christopher.
I told him that I loved David, and I should have never told Christopher that, but I did. He knew I was unhappy, but I didn't tell him to kill anybody. I didn't ask him to kill anybody.
Convinced Christopher Bowers killed Kay Parsons, detectives continue to pressure his mother, Becky, on what she knows of the murder.
Her story was that Christopher knew how upset she was about David, how she wanted to be with David. But she kept saying that she didn't know he was going to do it.
I kept telling Christopher that I wanted to be with David, and I put this thought in his mind to do something.
Becky played the consummate victim the whole way.
She then makes a strange admission. On the morning of the murder, she says she picked Christopher up at 4 a.m.
She couldn't answer me why. Why did you go pick him up at 4 o'clock in the morning and bring him over there? You knew what he was going to do. And she said, well, but I didn't think he would do it.
It's a stunning revelation.
She said she received a phone call a little bit later from Christopher saying, come pick me up. She goes down there and picks him up, and he's covered in blood. She says she asked Christopher, what'd you do? And he said, I took care of everything. I took care of it. She said, what did you do? And he said, I beat the out of her.
I was so scared.
She also told us about the shooting. She told us that it was Christopher that shot her. The plan was Christopher was supposed to just shoot the gun next to her so her friend could hear it. She said, yeah, he wasn't actually supposed to shoot her, which is a little poetic justice. And she said she wanted to do that so they could try to throw the investigation to try to confuse us.
They now believe that while Christopher committed the act, Becky was the mastermind.
You planted these seeds, you watered these seeds, you picked him up early in the morning so he could come over and reap that crop.
It's remarkable because it shows the degree of control she had over him and just how much, in many ways, he actually loved his mother, that he would go along with this.
We found out real quick with that interview just how conniving and manipulating that Becky actually is. I mean, because she didn't care about anything other than her and her happiness and what she wanted.
Becky's statement also removes any lingering doubts over Kay's husband.
She swore up and down that David did not have any knowledge of this. He didn't know what was going to happen. He was not involved in any way.
On March 27, 2009, Becky Sears and Christopher Bowers are charged with murder.
They're charged the same because they were both equally participating in the crime.
If you're going to arrest somebody for something that didn't do it, they're going to scream and holler, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. He didn't say a word. He was calm as he could be.
The painstaking analysis of the timeline reveals exactly what happened in the last hours of Kay's life.
Kay left and took her son to school. On the way to school, they stopped and got some fast food for breakfast, and then she drove back home.
Knowing Kay is gone, Christopher stages his ambush.
When she drove back home, she opened the garage. And then as she entered through the garage door into the foyer of the house, Christopher was lying in wait and immediately began to attack her with a hammer. She tried to fight back.
She literally was fighting for her life.
We could tell by the blood evidence. She was able to make it to the garage, and we found a bloody handprint sliding down the garage door opener, trying to open the garage door.
At some point, he switches weapons.
It was just so intense. You hear of, crimes of passion. This goes beyond that.
Christopher then leaves Kay near death and begins to cover his tracks.
Chris then stages that burglary and then stages the one at Becky's house to make it kind of a cover. It was like a burglary gone bad. Maybe they won't suspect me.
And then Becky received a phone call a little bit later from Christopher saying, come pick me up. She then took Christopher to her work. Then they got the phone call from Michael about the break-in, and they drove back to the house.
Michael coming home, I think, was just a coincidence. Ultimately, we determined he was not involved.
Christopher is the one that actually killed Kay. There's no doubt in my mind he did. And there's no doubt in my mind he did it because Becky asked him to. She's the one that manipulated her son into being a monster.
I think she played on the daily routines of Kay. She knew where she was gonna be, what time, when she'd be back, and so I think that she used that to her advantage to get Christopher in the house, have a game plan, and to make it easier for him to go next door and attack her.
The district attorney decided to go after the death penalty for the charges. Chris never turned on Becky. Chris never would say a bad word about his mother. They both take a plea deal, and they both get life in prison without the possibility of parole. She is one of the most narcissistic people I've ever met in my life. She thought she could get away with it.
There is a satisfaction there because I've heard all kinds of, you know, dang man, you must be you got a crystal ball or whatever. Now, I just, you know, you get out there and you get on the trail and you just follow it. And until you get some solid answer, concrete one way or the other, you don't stop.
What length would you go to be with a person that you love? It's just a sad situation for both families. You have these children who are going to be growing up without mothers.